This is the tragic story of soldiers on the battlefield who lost their life without even knowing it. This is the awful story of young men who lost all their potential while serving their country. This is the miserable story of parents who gave birth to children with severe deformities. And while it is all this is also the great story of hope. It is also the inspiring story of strength. And last, but definitely not least, it is also the grand story of American pride. This is the story of Agent Orange.
The Vietnam War was a war between Communist North Vietnam, known as Viet Cong, against South Vietnam and its allies, the United States and South Korea. It took place from 1954 to 1975. This also sparked the start of the Cold War between North America and Russia.
In mid-1960, President Ngo Dinh Diem of South Vietnam asked the United States to conduct aerial herbicide spraying in his country to eliminate forest cover and crops for North Vietnam and the Viet Cong, because the dense forest allowed the Viet Cong to hide in the bushes after short bursts of attacks. In November 1961, John F. Kennedy, the 35th president, launched the herbicidal warfare program, Operation Ranch Hand. He used rainbow herbicides, which were the defoliation agents used in the war. During battles with the Viet Cong, the South Vietnamese had difficulties fighting due to location. The dense forest allowed the Viet Cong to hide in the bushes after short scrimmages. This prevented the United States from having a chance to shoot at the Vietnamese, who were in a sense invisible. To stop this, rainbow herbicides were used.
The deadliest of the rainbow herbicides was Agent Orange. Agent Orange was a combination of 2,4,5-T acid and 2,4-D acid with traces of TCDD, and was the chemical compound used in the defoliation of Vietnamese forests. The main ingredient in Agent Orange that caused the defoliation was TCDD, a chemical dioxin that is suspected to be a factor in causing skin disease, cancer, reproduction problems, and immunological diseases.
Many soldiers sprayed the herbicide unprotected. Sometimes the soldiers spraying the dangerous substance wouldn't even wear a shirt.
It was not known that the chemical was actually quite harmful. Ergo, there were deadly health consequences on both sides that were not apparent at first. These are first-hand reports from Mr. Song Duc Han, a Korean soldier that fought on South Vietnam's side in the Vietnam War.
보험병원에 가면 얼마나 많이 있다고. 아까 나 말하는 사람이 문둥병이 옛날에 걸린 것처럼 막 손이 화가 나갖고 불어 터지는 매로 막 그러기도 하고 사람이 또 정신이 멍한 사람도 있고 이제 아까 또 말하는데 그 사람들이 이제 결혼을 했을 적에는 애를 낳으면 막 기형아를 낳고 근다 그래. 담보 기반이 있어갖고 그 당시에 전투하던 당시에는 그런 영향이 없었지. 근데 이제 기구해갖고 제대하고 살면서 이제 나타났지. 이것이 이제 담보 기간이 있었지.
Not only did it affect the people of the war, but it also did its initial job, deforestation, so well that the reforestation of the affected 3,100,000 hectares is nearly impossible.
Enough food to feed 600,000 people for a year has been destroyed.
There was a chemical known as dioxin that was a byproduct during the manufacturing of the herbicide. This was a chemical which made it quite dangerous and toxic to the human body.
Studies compared health problems between regular people and people with increased TCDD levels in their blood. Tests showed mixed results, but it showed that TCDD may possibly link exposure to the dioxin and an increase in health problems. These problems included different cancers, rashes, high blood pressure, amyloidosis, and other diseases.
Milton Ross, a Special Forces advisor near Pleiku, has a son born without the tips of his fingers.
Frank Moore is nearly dead from cancer. He thinks the cancer was caused by chemical defoliants he was exposed to as a soldier in Vietnam.
The government stopped military use of herbicides in Vietnam in 1971. It was also later banned from the US. Shortly after coming home from the war, veterans began experiencing health defects. They began to speak out against the war and Agent Orange, demanding something to be done. About 12,000 veterans filed claims in 1977 to the Department of Veterans Affairs. They demanded disability payments and health care for the symptoms which they thought were linked to Agent Orange. Veteran Maynard Cadillac voices his opinion.
And it's
supposed to be to take care of the veterans. Well, that's not entirely true anymore. You have to be service-connected. You have to have insurance. If you're not service-connected, and you got to be fall into one of these categories.
Unfortunately, they were rejected because it was stated that there was not any proof. Because of this, spokesmen such as Bobby Mueller came out and led efforts in awareness of the actions that occurred in Vietnam.
Okay, I got a mouth and I'll use it. And I just started to talk. My voice got amplified and I became a spokesman.
Bobby Mueller served in the military and in Vietnam until 1969 when he was shot and paralyzed. He then decided to fight for veteran treatment in the US, eventually founding the Vietnam Veterans of America Foundation. He was one of the many veterans that demanded fair treatment for their maladies.
To us, the Vietnam veterans, for years, were screaming for attention, screaming for help.
People such as Mueller began to fight to receive compensation and drew attention to Agent Orange, the chemical companies that manufactured it, and the US itself. Veterans tried to draw as much attention as possible and filed complaints claiming that they had been contaminated by the herbicide. These complaints were not honored for many years by the US government.
We don't mean to say that there isn't an Agent Orange effect, but at this point in time, we don't seem to see anything that confirms that there's something there specifically.
One win for the veterans was when they found that Dow, a chemical company that produced Agent Orange, was found to be skeptical about the herbicide from memos dating back to 1965. One scientist found out that the dioxin causes severe liver damage in a rabbit, which was connected back to the possible detrimental effects on humans. They did not want to reveal this discovery to the public to avoid anger from the veterans. By 1969, both Dow and the government knew that the herbicide had possibly caused birth defects, and this was proven through the use of pregnant female rats.
Due to this new information, veterans had motive and proof of Agent Orange being harmful. A large action lawsuit was filed in 1979 against 7 chemical companies that produced the herbicide. It ended up being settled out of court for a sum about $180 million in aid for Agent Orange victims.
The $180 million went to 50,000 people, and most only received a small amount of only $5,000. Even though the companies gave $180 million to the veterans, they did not admit to any relation between Agent Orange and health issues. The fight for complete compensation continued.
In 1984, Congress passed Public Law 98-542. This law gave compensation to the veterans, but only for one of the symptoms called soft tissue sarcoma. It also set regulations for compensation-related affairs. It stated how Agent Orange and atomic radiation should be compensated.
In 1991, the U.S. government passed the Agent Orange Act of 1991, also known as Public Law 102-4. This act, which was enacted on February 6, 1991, basically stated that certain diseases of which chloracne or other acne-type diseases which were of a 10% disability and were contracted within a year of being exposed to the herbicide agents would receive full compensation.
A few years after this act was made, President Clinton ordered that all constitutional funds would cover issues such as prostate cancer and nerve disease, as well as the already covered symptoms.
Agent Orange is the quintessence for the topic of conflict and compromise. Whether it was unknowingly or on purpose, they released the herbicide over Vietnam, which eventually led to many dangerous health problems for everyone or everything it touched. It created conflict for many veterans who were not aware of the possible consequences of working with the chemical.
Compromise for the affected people came slowly. Eventually, the veterans received compensation for their troubles in the form of money and aid. Even though the consequences for Agent Orange exposure were detrimental, the compromise of compensation made it easier for the veterans to deal with. Efforts were also given to have compromise for the other nations that fought during the war, such as Vietnam and South Korea.
The Koreans received compensation in the form of about $4 billion from chemical companies and $1 billion from the US government. On the other hand, Vietnam's attempt to sue was unsuccessful, so in 2006, the United States government decided to send people to assist in cleaning the land to get rid of the herbicide. All in all, even though Agent Orange was a very detrimental chemical herbicide, which may have caused many health problems to whoever it was exposed to, it was a strange means of also bringing nations and people together.